Don't mind me, I fell asleep waiting for the Canada report to come out 27 minutes before it was released. So I've been catching up. And while the shadows are working and plenty of us are working on the crumbs that may exist there, and while we cannot see it from the outside because it's pretty irrelevant to the United States, there are crumbs in there that we can tie back to our reality in which we can understand the full picture of what occurred. And what occurred is the word you all hate: unprecedented. Was unaliving 6 million Jays from the Yahtzees a punishable offense? No, it wasn't. Ethically wrong, they shouldn't have done it. However, there was no international law principles that said that it was illegal. There was no international bodies that could actually hold Germany accountable. Germany didn't even say, hey, you can hold us accountable. It was a community of countries that said this is so serious to peace and stability and security of the globe and of the region that this requires an unprecedented lawful solution. So the Nuremberg trials were created, a temporary court that prosecuted the crimes that occurred during the Yahtzees. Why does this matter? Because we have been thinking about, when it comes to EI, is some sort of fancy stuff that we can pick out right away and say, hey, that's illegal. But what if it isn't? What if what occurred was well within the bounds of what was not regulated or not positioned as necessarily illegal, because maybe it counts as freedom of speech. Maybe it counts under corporate personhood. In normal reality, this would mean that we really can't do anything with any of this. However, in the reality in which all of those crumbs lay into a threat to the global and domestic and regional peace and security. Now, this is when Article 4 of NATO can be invoked. This is when Article 5 of the non-traditional sense can also be provoked. But even without that foreign element, this is when us in the United States, as the government itself, becomes incapable of actually having resolved to something that wasn't necessarily illegal or regulated to that extent, to which we basically allowed for certain influences of fancy stuff to be traditionally inputted into our society so that it could influence an outcome in our popularity, right? So within this reality, it's very possible that very much the reason why he was allowed to enter in is because, one, Amendment 14, Section 3 has so much ambiguity that Congress itself has that authority to decide whether or not it's going to actually do anything about his legitimacy problem. And the fact that we as Americans don't push him like South Korea pushed their government means that we rely on political willingness. Our government does not hold political willingness. Why did this occur? Why was nothing done? Political unwillingness. However, also the fact that Amendment 14, Section 3 is kind of complicated to execute because there's a question, is it self-executing or is it not? The only legal principle there is to it not being self-executing, which means that he wouldn't automatically be disqualified, is Griffin's case, which is a judge who basically said, this is my opinion, I'm going to stray from the Constitution and say that if we allow for Section 3 of Amendment 14 to be self-executing, it's going to discriminate against Southerners. It's going to discriminate against the rebels, and they won't be able to hold office. That's stupid, but that was the argument. And as a result, the only reason for it to not be self-executing is that in itself, but through textualism, which Article 6 Supremacy Clause assures that the Constitution is the law of the land, so anything against the Constitution is void, which means that the judge's opinion should be void, but judges have judicial immunity now, so does that count? I don't know. So we're basically in a situationship to where, is it really cheating or is it not? No one really said it was official, right? So Amendment 14 Section 3 is complicated to execute. He's still not legitimate, right? You know, the fruit mango of the streets of Kim Jong-Ti is illegitimate. However, because of decorum, they don't really want to push that. So the next one will be fancy stuff, right? However, if that fancy stuff was created through traditional means that weren't regulated or illegal, then what resolve does our country have to fix that? Now, we do if we actually had guts, if we actually had legal resolve, and we actually maximize our constitutional authority. But our party doesn't have that backbone. Our party doesn't have that spine. But within this reality, if all that we have is non-traditional evidence that there was influence, because question, why is it that Cybertruck body got the tweet? Is there a question of, was it premeditated? Was there a reasoning behind all of this? And in fact, there are different crumbs of actual evidence, of actual sustainable evidence that positions that there was a wider conspiracy. But there's a difference between circumstantial evidence and actual evidence, right? However, when we come into a reality to where the sacrifice was the Constitution, which is what is void right now, it has to be restored. That allows for us non-traditional mechanisms and channels in which to restore it. But that is as long as the government is willing to restore it. And is our government willing to restore it? That's questionable because they love decorum. They'll probably say, 4 more years, donate to us or Democrats so we can save you, when in fact the Republican Party is telling us that they will suppress the Democrat power and they will suppress the Democrat voice. They definitely do online through their modernized censorship, to where it's extrajudicial, which means outside of the legal realm, to where it's not the country, so it's not the administration itself censoring. It is, but it's technically not, because the agencies, the tech companies, are serving as a proxy to censor what him having to censor. That is sort of social violence, because if corporations are people, then corporations are committing violence against us. In that reality, we can use the Equal Protection Clause to justify the reality that corporate personhood has become such a threat that it literally dissolved our constitutional republic, and as well as utilizing its coordinated task in order to subvert and to dictate political reality without actually allowing for democracy. This is a manipulation of democracy. This is an oligarchy. This is an authoritarianship. Fortunately, I'm not dependent on TikTok for income. However, they are suppressing the left and Democrat voices. In that reality, what is that? That is correcting the behavior. That is saying, hey, if you talk about these topics, we're going to decrease your RPM. So what do? You obey in advance. You normalize that new normalization of issues that they want you to talk about, and you don't talk about those that they penalize you for. This is leveraging income for an arbitrary political gain from corporations themselves. Now, I need us to realize that these breaches across the branches serve as indisputable evidence that there has to be severe restoration, severe resolve. And in fact, I would say once it's all in the clear, we need a zero confidence on all our branches. I will talk about that when that's relevant. However, what we must know is that the timeline of when NATO or other countries may want to do something will be different to when we want to do something, or to when our reality needs something to be done. They may have months to years. We have days to weeks. So in this reality, the only situation in which a high-ranking member of the United States is capable of restoring the Constitution is if there is a constitutional crisis, but one that you can see. So the fact that there is a virtual constitutional collapse doesn't mean that that's severe. What that requires is a lawful disruption, like South Korea, like Georgia. I know people are scared. Well, they're going to send martial law and they're going to send all of these people. Yeah, they do that in every single country. How do you think people win against, people get lost. People will be lost. I've accepted that fate. But the reality is that either we risk that in that reality and where we don't have any other recourse, or we remain in the tyranny until who knows when. Mexico had it for 70 years, a democratic dictatorship of the same party across the branches. Do we want that? Because the only decision here is whether we want to remain here and have our constitution removed, have all our rights ended, or are we going to take it back? Take it back through lawful means.